Hello, everyone, and welcome to Patriot Underground. Today is January 15th already. My goodness. January 15th, 2022. Thank you so much for joining me for another edition of Patriot Underground. Today I'm going to be doing a coffee chat. So I really hope you guys are up for it, and I hope you're having a good Saturday. A lot of stuff going on. As always, I like to give folks a kind of backdrop when I'm of the setting here as I'm driving around in my car, because I don't show my face or show where I am. So basically, it's sunny morning, very sunny, but yesterday I did a podcast, an update on information going on in Antarctica, and I woke up this morning and it feels like I'm living in Antarctica. It's 5 degrees out and it's windy and it's absolutely frigid. So this is actually the first time I've done a coffee chat driving around in the dead of winter. It's a little bit strange because I started my channel back in the spring. It's hard to believe that it's been 10 months already. Strange, very strange. In some ways it feels like it's been 10 years. And then in other ways it feels like it's been 10 minutes. It's a very, very odd place to be. But I'll tell you, the blessing that this audience has brought, upon my life, that continues just to grow on a daily basis, is absolutely astounding to me. And I'm just so humbled by everybody's support and everyone's willingness to listen and to share their thoughts and reactions. It really is an amazing feeling. I haven't talked about this in a little while. So as people know, if you're new to my channel, because I'm getting some new subscribers, which I'm very grateful for. So if you're new to my channel and you haven't listened to a coffee chat before, I kind of get a little bit more personal and talk about just sort of what's going on in my life, and how it intertwines with what's going on, hopefully, in your lives and what's going on with the world in general, and have you resonate with that. That's always my hope and prayer that will happen. And so often it does. And as I say, I'm grateful for that. But we're seeing an awful lot of movement in the right direction, in my view. And I think that, situations really, really heating up. You've got China just announced that they're going to be closing their ports. So you can imagine what's coming. Why would China do that? Of course, they're getting ready for something big. We know that the Russia-Ukraine situation is imminent, meaning that war is imminent. And is it going to be actual kinetic fighting? Yes, I believe it will be in certain areas. I think that the entire operation largely is staged, but I do believe that when I say staged, I mean, planned by the White Hats, and essentially they knew all along that it was going to come down to this, that these were where the chess pieces were going to be at this stage in the game. So I think that element is going to be a pantomime, but I do believe there will be some actual fighting, of course. And I think that there are going to be people who die. And unfortunately, there's no getting around that. It's weird sometimes, because I talk about this whole situation that we're facing as a pantomime, and what goes through my mind at the very same time is that, well, yes, it's a pantomime, but also people are dying. Also, this is a real situation. Also, this is a real war, World War III or IV, depending on how you view history. Of course, how all of us view history is going to be dramatically different in the years ahead. Of course, I think that the history books are going to have to be entirely rewritten. In fact, that was really the main topic of my podcast yesterday, talking about the history of Antarctica, when I came across the amazing presentation of David Fisher Childress. I want to make sure I get his name right. I think I might have messed it up a couple times in the podcast. And David, if you end up listening, my apologies. But an amazing presentation about the real history of World War II and leading up to World War II and what was happening. And it's just a reminder to me, as fascinating as it is, just that topic of Antarctica alone. When I think about the larger scope of what we're dealing with here, in terms of how much has been hidden from us and how much of our history is going to have to be relearned, retaught, rewritten, we've totally been lied to and misunderstood every single thing that's happened, more or less, because all of our information has been completely toxic and poisoned and weaponized, as we know, for a long time. And it's an amazing paradox in a sense, because in so many ways, life for so many people feels or has felt, I think, for the past couple of decades, in terms of the advances in technology and all of the ways that we can communicate with one another, and there's so many different things that have happened in the past couple of decades have made us feel as if humanity is moving in the right direction in terms of all of these new developments in technology. And yet at the same time, as all of that technology and all that got rolled out, before we understood anything about frequency and before we understood how these devices were ultimately they were designed to be weapons, and they were designed to attack us as a silent weapon in various different ways. And I think it's pretty well documented. But we didn't really know anything about frequency. And so therefore, it was hard to understand why all of these good things were coming into our lives. And at the same time, they were making us feel so miserable. And they were making us feel so much more isolated, and therefore so much more depressed and disillusioned with the world. I know I was. And for a long time, it really confused me. And I didn't understand why everything just felt like it had this dark tinge to it. And I could never really figure out what that was until, of course, I finally got on my journey and red pilled. And now today, I understand things that I didn't understand back then. And I think for so many people out there who are still asleep, they are probably somewhat stuck in that conundrum themselves, And of course, not only is it, the love of the technology and all that stuff, but it's also just the general comfort of not having to change their worldview, not having to rethink their worldview, not having to broaden their perspective on anything, because that would force people to make changes in their lives. And if there's one thing that we've been conditioned to do by the Cabal, it's to be lazy and apathetic. They've actually taught us that, or, tried to teach us, and they haven't indoctrinated a big portion of our society to believe that being lazy and being apathetic and just kind of sitting back and letting life happen and being cynical about everything, that is virtue. That somehow is promoted by the mainstream as being the way that we should behave. I mean, when you look at what they put on TV, and as people know who listen to my show, I try as the best I can to avoid mainstream media because I absolutely despise it. But every now and then, I'm forced to. I mean, honestly, folks, I'll tell you, we have a couple of TVs in our house. All right. I don't even turn the TV on. The TV that's downstairs where I do most of my recording, that TV hasn't even been on. We bought it years ago. It hasn't even, I don't even think, turned on in a couple of years, except for maybe one or two occasions. But the reality of the matter is, I have these TVs in my house. They don't even get used. I just completely turn my back on it. But like I say, every now and then, I have to, get exposed to this regardless. It gets force fed to you one way or another, whether you're at a friend's house or whether you're out at an airport or restaurant. They're always going to be there. So, you see what they put out. Heck, even when you're pumping gas at the gas station, they force feed you this crap. I literally have to pump my gas and then just turn my back away from the poison that they're trying to shovel down my throat in the 2 or 3 minutes that I'm pumping my gas. That's how much I hate the mainstream media and everything that they stand for, everything that they put out. But the point I wanted to make really is just to underscore the reality that we all understand is that what they put out is all, first of all, it's all engineered and designed by these, essentially by the CIA and all their various different, interrelated agencies. They're the ones who design what they would push as, the modern man and the modern woman, and what what that should look like. You see, that's how they do the social engineering. They don't just overtly come out and say, this is how we want you to act, and this is how we want you to behave, and this is, they're not ham-fisted like that. It's way more suggestive in a sense. I mean, it goes beyond that, as we've talked about before, in terms of mind control and the actual devices they use. But let's just talk now simply about the suggestive program. What they put out there is, this is what a man should act like, and this is what a woman should act like. They do that by putting out and marketing and promoting the most vacuous, empty, hollow shells that you've ever seen. I mean, at this point, even when I'm at the gas station and I see these little blurbs like Cheddar News and, these 30-second little, I mean, I look at these creatures and I think to myself, are they even human? I don't think they are, but I mean, even if they are, they're the most hollow, empty shells that you've ever seen. They come across as fake and plastic and phony. And now for me, understanding, the way the whole paradigm works, I just can't not see the evil anymore. And that's the thing. That's the burden of knowing, as we all understand, is like, once you see it, you can never unsee it. And once you know it, you can never turn your back on it. You can never be ignorant again. You can never blue pill again. And I'll tell you, folks, the longer this journey goes on, in certain ways, the narrower the path becomes. I was talking to someone about this the other day, just in terms of family members, in terms of friends, in terms of all of the coworkers and all the people that we have to interact with on a daily basis. I mean, the deeper we get into this process, the harder it is for me to reconcile having that foot in two different worlds, like I've talked about so many times. Because it's at this point, it's just like, I don't even want that foot in their world anymore. I want the people, obviously the people, the relationships, the certainly, especially, immediate family, people that one way or another, I never want to lose contact with. That's what's keeping my foot in that world. But aside from that, I mean, even just, I feel so far away from those people now. I think that's the point I'm making, is the longer the journey goes on and the longer I walk in the direction which I believe is the right, towards God and towards truth and towards awakening, the farther I get from those people. And that includes people, unfortunately, it includes people in my own family, it includes my parents, and it's painful. I have to be honest. And when I talk about these things, I know that there are literally millions and millions of people out there who are going through the same thing. Not that millions of people are listening to this, but certainly there are many out there who are going through the same exact experiences in their own ways and in my audience. And so when I talk about these things, I know that it, in a sense, represents in some ways what we're all going through, but it's painful. It's painful to see and to experience and to watch certain people that mean something to you, that have always been a part and a foundation in your life, a part of your foundation, to see them just continually double and triple and quadruple down on this narrative, and to just sink further and further into the matrix, into the illusion, the delusion, I should say. I mean, that's really what it is at this point. I mean, it's the exact same thing that they used to say about us, that we're delusional. I mean, you can see now how it's always just been a projection. We're the conspiracy theorists, we're the delusional ones, We're not the conspiracy theorists. I mean, honestly, folks, it's just that they're idiots. I mean, it's just that simple. The whole thing, I mean, calling someone a conspiracy theorist, I honestly think in 2022, nobody should even use that term anymore. It's just ridiculous. I mean, and the only people that are actually using that term are the deepest, most brainwashed people, or the people, of course, who have engineered this whole thing and been a part of it all along. But the whole narrative of the mainstream media and the whole narrative of the cabal just in general, I mean, everything is falling apart. They've opened up investigations now, new investigations into sexual misconduct with Bill Gates. So you can kind of see where that's going. We've got more and more CEOs stepping down. We've got China closing up all of its ports. We've got war imminent, seemingly, in Russia and Ukraine. It's just, the longer we move on, I mean, the longer it just seems like it's obvious that we're about to hit this breaking point. You know, this event is imminent. And, you know, if you're not paying attention to that, well, I mean, good luck. Because when this thing hits, it's going to be absolutely seismic. And I mean, honestly, I talk about the energy every time I do a coffee chat, sometimes even more often, just because I just simply feel the amplification of it on a daily basis. I can't turn away from it. It's almost as if it's taken control of me, and I am experiencing this crazy energy. I was actually watching a Megan Rose. She did a short video. I think it was a couple days ago, and the topic of the video is she was talking about like spiritual bullying. And she made some really interesting points. It was really more, I was kind of addressing, I think, a lot of people out there, I guess, who have kind of targeted her and said, "Oh, don't listen to her." And she was making some broader comments about the energy. There are two competing energies in this realm, and probably everywhere in the universe. But the way she characterized it is, you've got the source energy, which is, what we understand, or what I understand as God. And then, which is essentially just giving people their freedom and their free will and embracing and loving everyone to the best of our ability. And then the competing energy with that, the evil energy, as I would think of it, is the energy that seeks to dominate, control, and manipulate. And I thought that was just a very simple, straightforward, but true way of expressing what it is that we're dealing with. Because when I think about, getting back to my family and what I'm going through, I see how that's playing out exactly as she described it. I mean, people are gravitating one way or another. They're being pulled. I mean, all of us really are competing with, we're having to contend with those two energies, because that's the spiritual war that's going on right now. And we know which side wins, but nevertheless, she talked about how we were, people are healing and having that experience, and also at the same time, the way she put it, the ebb and flow of this energy is we're also sometimes feeling, very aggressive. People are lashing out. People are going through extremes right now because of the energy level, because of this spiritual combat. That's always been going on, but it's hitting this climactic moment. And of course, as we all know, it's going to burst out into the surface one way or another very, very soon. So I thought that was a really interesting way of characterizing, because I think about the people in my life that are still asleep. And, just going back and thinking about our relationship and, the way that I've always thought of them and the way that I think of them now. And there's a difference, because I can identify that energy in those people. I can identify that controlling, manipulative, guilt-ridden type of energy that people, because I myself was kind of operating on that level for a good portion of my life, because I was born into that energy in my own family and my own surroundings. For the most part, it seemed to be sort of the dominant energy, and I got sucked into that. And when you're born into something, and this is what becomes normal to you, you don't question it. You don't think that. I mean, for a large portion of my life, I just thought that this was the way that the world is. This is the way that I mean, I wasn't thinking in terms of energy, of course. Obviously, at that time, I just assumed that my worldview that was based upon what I now recognize as that energy was normal. And therefore I was kind of, I operated mostly on it was a fear-based operating system. And, in terms of those two energies, one's based on fear, one's based upon faith. However you want to characterize either one of those two energies, that's really kind of what it comes down to. An operating system. Either you are progressing through your journey in life and being led by faith. And for me, that faith is in Jesus Christ. For you, it may be in something different. I know probably for most of my audience, they share my faith. But I've said many times, I don't care if people aren't Christian. I'm not here to convert people. That's not why I did this podcast. That's, I don't think that at this stage in the game, what's most important to me is just people's character. Because honestly, like we've talked about so many times on this show, there's so much about religion. There's so much about, the established religions of the world that are a lie, including my own belief system in terms of, the history, in terms of the real truth about Jesus and his life, all of this stuff. I mean, so much of it is based on a lie that I wouldn't dare to stand in judgment of someone having a different viewpoint and having a different faith or a different conception of God. I mean, heck, I don't even care, quite honestly, if somebody doesn't even believe in God, as long as you're a good person, as long as you don't want to hurt children, as long as you hate evil, and you're my ally, you're my friend, you're my brother, you're my sister. And it doesn't really matter, because a person's relationship with God, I've always believed that to be a very personal matter. At least it's always been for me. My relationship with God obviously has evolved and changed as I've moved through my life, but never was there a time in my life that it wasn't something that I didn't view as something sacred, because it was personal, because it was between me and my Creator. And I think for me, that's the most important thing. But being a good person, being a good human being, decent, this is about good versus evil. I mean, that's been well established. This is not about religion versus religion, at least in my view. I mean, some people may have a different view. Some people, I know sometimes get criticized for this by certain folks in the audience who are, much more rigid, I would say, in their views about, about the Bible, about Christianity. And, folks are entitled to that. But I've always said my allegiance is to the truth. And I'm going to talk about what I believe to be true. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm always going to get it right. That's the other thing sometimes I get criticized for, and that's okay too, because I accept that. That's part of the journey. That's part of what you have to accept when you're in this type of position, when you're putting yourself out there. You're not always going to get it right. You're going to get criticized. You're going to get trolled. You're going to get all of these things. And I honestly, folks, I don't mind that at all, because if you want the truth, those types of criticisms and trolls and all that stuff, the negative stuff that goes, I mean, it doesn't even register on the radar in terms of, I mean, especially when you compare it to the positive feedback that I get. It's overwhelmingly positive feedback. Even if folks don't necessarily agree with me on something and they want to make a comment, most folks are, respectful, and they're constructive in their criticism. And that's fine. I mean, that's important too, because I'm open to constructive criticism. I don't think that I have all the answers by any stretch of the imagination. But I talk about what I believe to be true or truthful information. Sometimes I talk about things that, I'm not necessarily convinced they're true, but they're being reported, they're being talked about, and so therefore, they're part of a larger conversation and therefore have to be addressed. But I think most of the audience understands that. This is not about, for myself, and I'm sure probably for anyone else out there doing similar work, it's not about being right all the time. It's not about who can be the most accurate or who can be the quickest. And I mean, I don't know, maybe some people maybe they think that way. To me, that's not really what it's about. It's about giving the audience my best analysis and my best attempt at reporting what the zeitgeist is, and that's, I think, it's an honor. It's an honor that so many folks, tune into my show in order to get that. And believe me, I don't lose sight of that for 1 second. I mean, it's an absolute privilege. But it's an amazing time to be alive. That's something that I have to keep coming back to, because sometimes I can get so bogged down in so much of the stress, and it's been very stressful. I mean, like I say, I continue to feel more and more distance between a lot of people and myself in my life. That gap is continuing to widen, and there's so many crazy things going on in the world that sometimes, I have to pause and I have to remember, where we're headed and what we're fighting for, and how much better the world is going to be. I mean, I think that's something that we all talk about, but I think it's something that we should talk about even more, because talking about it ultimately helps to manifest. And the larger conversation, I think one of the things that I've learned in this entire journey is that what's really being competed over, between good versus evil, is the consciousness of humanity. And that's why, it's an information war, it's a psychological war, but at its core, the most powerful force in the universe, aside from, of course, the Lord himself, is the collective consciousness of humanity. Because we're all manifestations of God, and our collective consciousness manifests reality. I mean, even our individual consciousness manifests reality, but collectively, there's no bigger power. There's no stronger force. That's why the Cabal hijacked our consciousness, various different attack vectors and silent weapons, to be able to use us and our energy to manifest their reality. It's really the entire premise of the Matrix. And once we realize that, we've been manifesting, collectively again, once we come to this realization that we've been manifesting their reality and not ours, that our reality has been, we've been enslaved without our awareness, that's going to be a shocker to people, right? Especially, folks here in America who, good people, but they're still asleep. And they're walking around with this attitude that, they think they're actually free. And yeah, in certain parts of the country, it's, in free America, yeah, they really are free in certain parts of this country. There's no two ways about it. But in the larger scope of things, when they come to understand that, all of us, this is to varying different degrees, obviously, but all of us are free range slaves in terms of the way that the world is set up, the way that we're burdened with debt, the way that we're held back, the boots that are on our neck. I think it's going to be a major shock to people when they come to that realization, because so many people out there are walking around thinking that they're truly free. And the reality of the matter is that it couldn't be farther from the truth. But that's the genius of, and I hesitate to give them a compliment, but the genius of the Cabal is what they were able to accomplish was to convince the slaves that they were free and give them a free range. The world, that's why the term prison planet, that InfoWars uses, or Alex Jones, it's a really great term, because the entire planet really is a prison. But they constructed it in such a way, kind of like the Truman Show, they constructed it in such a masterful way to make us feel as if we were the masters of our destiny. We were the ones who were, manifesting reality, and we were the ones who were really free. And when the whole time they used their black magic, their dark magic, to be able to hoodwink everyone, to mind control, to gaslight, create this mass formation psychosis, however you want to characterize it, to get people to completely ignore the elephant in the room, which has always been, as I've I talk about this all the time, is the income inequality, or I should just say the wealth inequality. When you look at the simple truth of the 1%, it's amazing to me how people know this, and yet they accept it. And with the attitude of there's nothing that can ever be done to change that or fix that. And what's worse, they don't even link that to so many of the problems that are going on in the world. I mean, it's really linked to really pretty much all of the problems are created by that. They have their core. I mean, the cause of them is rooted in economics, because you've got billions of people competing for a scarcity of resources. I mean, it's just really that simple. It's just like people know this, but they just kind of go, yeah, and they just kind of they downplay it, like it's not a big deal. It amazes me because it just I experience some level of cognitive dissonance when I think about it, because I just can't imagine how people can't put two and two together and realize how significant that reality is. That 99% of the wealth is owned by 1%. And you don't think that we collectively, humanity, have any means of addressing that and changing that. See, we've all been indoctrinated to believe that that's always the way it's been. It's always the way it's going to be. And they've convinced us that the best way to approach life is to figure out how we can become a part of that, how we can chase after that American dream, which is, it's a farce. Doesn't mean that, certain people a lot of people haven't been successful in America. It's not to say that, but I mean, come on, folks, even if you do achieve a certain level of success, we understand how that goes. You can only get so far before you pretty much have a choice to make in terms of the Cabal, the Illuminati. They're going to make you an offer you can't refuse. So even if you can somehow achieve the success that you want to achieve, chances are you're going to get sucked into this evil system or, get taken out by it. And that's the truth. And all of us, even if we live comfortable, what we would characterize as comfortable lives financially. I mean, I wouldn't characterize mine that way necessarily. Not at least not as comfortable as I'd like it to be. But people have different economic situations. I recognize that. People in the audience. I'm sure there are probably some people in the audience who have a lot of money, and then there are probably folks out there who have, are in a situation where probably most people are, where it's month to month, if not week to week. And all of these resources, all this wealth has been stolen from us. And we have been left fighting over the crumbs for such a long time. And that's why I just can't wait to see the rollout of Nasara and Jassara. It's not even about the money. It's just about leveling the playing field. It's about giving everybody the resources that they actually deserve, the resources that were put here by God for us. And I've talked about it many times, how this planet and God created us to live in abundance. He did not create us to live in scarcity. And I don't believe for a second that God created us so that we could live a life of misery, a life of suffering, a life of, the way that they've constructed the universe. There's no way that that's the way God intended for us to live. But the flip side to that coin is that, as we've talked about many times, God's highest law, the universe's highest law, is that of free choice and free will. And so at some level, because we've been unwilling collectively and unaware, I mean, up until this point, I mean, you can claim ignorance for a long time. I mean, they had information completely locked down to the point where humanity really didn't have much of a chance. But now, with all of this information coming out, I mean, and the opportunity to seize upon all that information, to seize upon all of that truth and to transform this world, that is really the opportunity that we have. And to see so many people, in my life who don't even recognize it. And don't even recognize the significance of where we are. They're just walking around in a complete state of fear. And, it's sad to witness it. I can criticize it objectively, and I do quite a bit on my show, but when I see it play out personally in my own life and people that I really care about, and really, I mean, for most of my life, respected, and it's honestly, it's hard to go through a process where you come to the realization that the people that you thought had certain qualities just simply do not. And I've talked about many times how God is revealing all of this. He's putting it all out there. I think that this whole situation was designed to be a massive disclosure. And humanity was not only going to learn the truth about all the things that we talk about, but we're learning the truth. I think even before we learn all of the horrific stuff, we're seeing the truth of all of the people that we know, all of the folks out there who we thought were a certain way. It turns out that or the assumptions that we made. I mean, I don't know about you, but at one point in my life, I never would have believed that someone could be so smart intellectually and yet so stupid and so blind spiritually, and not even that, just lack common sense, lack the ability to detach themselves from what the media is saying and to seek out their own information and to think independently. I mean, we've all come to realize that intelligence has absolutely nothing to do with spiritual awareness and the ability to break free from the mind control. It's spiritual. But we never would have, at least I, never would have thought that it was possible that so many people could be so smart in so many different ways and then walk around with a mask on in the middle of nowhere, or drive around with a mask on with no one else in the car. And you sit there and you think to yourself, and now, of course, as I've been talking about, the truth is just coming out. It's pouring out from the mouths of the villains themselves, and people still don't see it. And that's the thing that's crazy. And I've heard a lot of the insiders talk about how the white hats themselves, the real inner circle, the real Q team, they can't even believe how difficult it is to red pill people, to wake people up. They didn't think that it was going to take this long. And they're actually, in a sense, the challenge that they have is, of course, until the big event actually unfolds, they have to, they can't be too, they have to still maintain the social order. That's kind of it's this weird paradox where they have to uphold that social order and make it so that things don't fall apart. But at the same time, to make that upholding of the social order so insane and asinine and ridiculous to the point where people just don't believe it and wake them up at the same time. It's this kind of dual goal that they're going for. But they don't even, they couldn't believe it and still can't believe how many people and how deep and how strong the mind control is, and to the point where people are just completely willfully ignorant of reality. And that's what it's come down to, unfortunately. But, I think there also comes a point, having said all that, where you have to, I mentioned detachment a moment ago. You have to detach yourself from that too. And from those relationships to some extent, I sense that, and there's a part of it that scares me, but, I sense that, kind of growing detachment from all of these, different people in my life. And at the same time, a growing attachment to new people. And it's a strange, wonderful experience, but it's a little bit frightening in a lot of ways, to leave behind everything that you once believed in and once accepted as reality. That's why so many people, they just don't want to even begin this journey, because maybe deep down inside people know and can sense that at a certain point in that journey, they're going to reach a crossroads. And quite frankly, I think I'm at that point where you have to start making difficult decisions in terms of your interpersonal relationships and, where you decide that you want to put your energy. I love putting my energy into the show, into the podcast, and the communicating with the audience. I mean, that's what I'm passionate about. And I'm seeing the fruits of that, putting my energy into that, as opposed to putting my energy into relationships that, quite frankly, only cause me stress at this point. And they don't really, there's really not. It's sad because at one point, despite ideological differences, despite political differences, the world was such that, you could put that aside and you could still have a really satisfying and meaningful relationship with someone, because politics was a part of life. It wasn't life itself. I've talked about this before. And it's like, at this point, it's no longer, it doesn't feel that way anymore, because we've hit that crossroads, not just personally, but, as the entire world, that no longer can we afford to live under the illusions anymore. No longer can we afford to be gaslit. And no longer can we afford on an energetic level to give our energy to that which is really kind of toxic for us, or drains our energy so that we can't put it to where God wants us to put it. And that's, I think, a big part of what I'm starting to realize, is that it's become pretty clear to me that God wants me to put my energy into what I'm doing. And I'm sure for you, you're starting to realize that in your own lives, in terms of how you pursue the truth and how you are contributing overall to this effort of the Great Awakening. But, again, I contrast that with certain relationships, and it's hard for me even to even give those relationships any energy at this point, because it's, what happens is just I get drained of my energy. I get angry. I'm filled with just disgust and negativity. It lowers my vibration, quite honestly. And it comes back to that energy, because it's that energy that these people are living under and they're dominated by, and they don't even realize it. And when you interact with them, and they're controlled by that manipulative energy, that controlling energy, that energy that seeks to feed off of another person as opposed to liberate that person and give them free will, and to love them, and to encourage them, and to embrace them as who they are. I mean, the truth is, folks, now that I've been introduced to that energy in the form that I have through all the people that I've come into contact with, it's so dramatically changed my life, that, in the sense that now that I've experienced it, it's all I want to experience. And I know that that's not realistic. I mean, I still have to have these relationships to a certain degree. I mean, who knows how long it's going to be before, the inversion is put right side up again, and that's going to change everything. This big event is going to start a process that's not going to be reversed. But until that point, I still have to maintain these relationships. Don't get me wrong. But what I'm suggesting is, it's just, on an energetic level, it's becoming harder for me to give my energy to things that, to give my energy to that controlling force, to interact with that manipulative, guilt-ridden, fear-soaked energy. Because I've learned, at a certain point in time, even though I wasn't conscious of it, I think what I was trying to do was use my energy, which was always in stark contrast to that, on a deeper level, to try to confront that negative energy in those people, and to try to get them to see the truth, so that and introduce them to a new energy, and they've rejected it. And that's the thing. That's what makes it so difficult, is, when you interact with low vibration people, it's like, it's very hard to raise them to your level. What usually happens is you get sucked down into their level. That seems to be the way the dynamic works. And there has to be a willingness on behalf of that person in order to raise their own vibrational frequency. And if they don't have that willingness, because that's really what it all comes down to, in my view. It's spiritual, of course. And I believe that willingness is a blessing from God. It's a prompting. It's something that God puts in your heart. Is a willingness to seek the truth. And if you don't have that, well, there's no possible way, even when you're around a higher vibrational frequency type person, you're not going to rise to their level. You're going to do everything because you're dominated by an energy that seeks to pull that person down to your level. And even though people aren't aware of it, that's exactly what they're doing. And it's frustrating for us who are, we're on a higher frequency, but we realize that there's no way that we can pull them up to our level if they don't have the willingness. And it's so important. That word is so important. I talked about how, Wano Sabin, he keeps repeating that quote over and over and over. There are none so blind as those who will not to see. And there's that word, will. It's willingness. It's free will. It's a choice. And if people, it's a spiritual choice. Don't get me wrong, but it's still a choice. It's free will. And people who aren't willing to make that choice and to take at least a small step in that direction, well, it doesn't matter how high of a vibrational frequency you're operating under. They're still going to try to feed off of that. And their method of feeding off of that is to try to bring it down, because that's their frequency. That's where they get their satisfaction from, is by pulling things down. Anything that, that seeks to go off on its own, a free spirit that seeks to roam, they want to grab that spirit and lock it back up in the shed. Do they know? Are they conscious of that? No, I don't think so. Probably not. But that's the spirit of the enemy, you see. That's what they don't want. Gene talks about it in terms of, the wild horses that can't be corralled. That's who we are. We simply will not submit to their energy. But at the same time, their energy has an effect on us. And, it's becoming more and more clear to me that in terms of free will, it's also a question of my own free will. Do I want to give these people my energy? Do I want to give that to them? And for what? Or do I want to give it to people who are operating at that higher frequency and learn from them and commune with them and to develop those bonds and relationships with them? And I've talked about how, this whole Great Awakening process is really causing us all to rethink the idea of, what family really means and what relationships are really important. How we define the quality of our relationships and who our family really is. And blood ties are always going to be, I've said this, many times, your parents, your children, your brothers, your sisters, your blood relationships are always going to be there, and they're always going to have that significance. And I'm not suggesting that people should take that lightly. Certainly none of us do, really. But I think what we're realizing is that the concept of blood ties being, causing people to kind of stay inside of a box just to maintain those relationships. I think more and more people are rejecting that ideology and realizing that there are so many other beautiful souls out there, so many other people that are resonating on that same frequency, at that same level, that are desperately seeking that type of a connection. That's what this experience has taught me. And it's been an amazing journey so far. It's been an amazing blessing. So hopefully, folks, you enjoyed this coffee chat. Please let me know in the comments. Make sure you subscribe to my different platforms. Again, Podbean, YouTube, BitChute, and Rumble. And let me know what you thought in the comments. And I will be back soon with another episode, God willing. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. Have a wonderful weekend. Patriot out.